Thank you very much. And finally, we have Michael Balcomb, who I know has been a member for a long time, and who is now the head of the Family Federation in Europe and the Middle East. Is that right?
Thank you. Thank you, Irina. I will try to be brief. I want to just talk about 2 points. I won't recap the things that my colleagues have shared, but I want to introduce one more point, and that is a demographic threat that I see. Many of you may be aware that Japan and Korea have the lowest birth rates in the democratic world. In fact, in Korea, there's only 0.7 children born to each woman of childbearing age. That doesn't sound too bad, but when you do the numbers, it means that 100 years from now, there'll only be 4 Koreans left alive for every 100 today. It's a bit better in Japan, but even so, if nothing changes in 100 years, there'll only be 9 Japanese left for every 100 who are there today. Now, full disclosure, I'm married to a Japanese woman, beautiful girl that I met 42 years ago. We have 5 children, 3 grandchildren. But I can see the evidence of depopulation every time I go to my in-laws' home. Fields that used to be flourishing, full of rice, lie empty now because there are no young people willing to tackle the difficult life of a Japanese farmer. For many years, our unification community, like other immigrant communities, provided part of the solution to this because our families tend to be large and they also tend to cross national and cultural borders, bringing spouses from other nations. These intercultural marriages have done wonders in breaking down the barriers between nations that have once been enemies and cultures as well. But I have to say that this recent crisis and the relentless torrent of media and governmental attack is having a serious effect on the morale of our young generation, now second and third. And honestly speaking, it's such a temptation for them to step away from the traditions of marriage and family, of our tradition, to walk away from the consequences of that, which, as you've heard, include discrimination in employment, housing, and more. And they're already confused enough in this era of fake news, AI-generated media. Other immigrant and faith communities in Japan face the same problem, and it's cultural. You know, children who have a Japanese parent and a non-Japanese parent are routinely called hafu, Japanese for half, meaning, well, you're half Japanese, half a citizen, half a human being. This is really bad. And honestly speaking, if we continue to lose our second generation, we face an existential threat. And indeed, so does Japan. It's an island nation. If it continues to close its doors to new ideas, new cultures, new traditions, the future is quite bleak. My second point, which comes to the topic of this conference and the role or contribution of religious movements and new religious movements to society, is this. An anecdote. In 2000, our founders, Reverend Moon, Mrs. Moon, went to the United Nations and said the United Nations is in danger because it is ill-prepared to face the rising tide of religious passions which are leading to conflict. This is before 9/11, before ISIS, before Al-Qaeda, all those things. I think it was very prescient of him, and he suggested that the UN should incorporate a spiritual council, an upper house, if you like, which could use the wisdom of religious leaders to try to deal with these problems before they broke out into violence and war. And privately, he also said, this is good for religious leaders too, because in the egalitarian confines of the United Nations, they'll have to lay aside their petty differences and see how they can work together. Well, that recommendation was never adopted. It was supported by the Philippines and a few other nations. I still remain hopeful because I think religions have a crucial role to act as the conscience, not only of the United Nations, but of governments in general. I'm here today from the United Kingdom, And in the last few months, we've heard so many cases of governmental abuse. You may not have heard of them here in France. There was the post office scandal where thousands of people were prosecuted, dozens sent to jail, tainted blood, misbehavior of the politicians. It's clear to me that if the voice of faith is silenced, governments tend to misbehave. I'm also an American citizen. When I look across the Atlantic to the choices facing America in November, frankly, I am worried. And many of you are worried about the results of the recent European elections, the apparent rise of extremists both on the right and the left. So I put it to you that religious people have a duty, a moral duty, to be a voice of conscience. Mother Moon, our current leader, uses the metaphor of a railway terminus. Our hotel is right next to the Bordeaux main station, so I've been thinking about this as I hear the trains coming in all time. The point being, the trains come in from all parts of the country, it doesn't matter, but once they arrive here in Bordeaux, you have to get off, and you have to move in a new direction. I think that new direction is to work together, to speak up, to be the conscience for society and governments which are going astray. And for that to happen, no religion can be excluded, no religion can be persecuted or marginalized. Everybody has to be free to speak their conscience. Otherwise, as the prophet Isaiah said, they say, peace, peace, but there is no peace. We're not here today just to complain about the treatment of our movement in Japan, but to sound a warning, because for sure, after us there will be others. And you know the saying, they came for the Jews, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers for keeping brilliantly to time.